Hello and welcome to our 7th make of Christmas. I'm Stephanie Soebbing with Quilt Addicts Anonymous. Today we are making a very oldie but a goodie. We are going to replay our how to make a pillowcase tutorial. This tutorial is so old, it predates actually finishing our sunroom so that we can have a video studio / this is actually my functional sewing area, by the way. So I filmed actually this one in my dining room long time ago, so I'm a bit thinner then, but hey, that happens, and I'm pregnant, so I've got a very good excuse. But anyway, so this is how you can take some of your extra yardage that you have left over to make a coordinating pillowcase to go with your quilt that you're gifting. It is great for kids. My daughter this morning was just asking if we could change out her pillowcases so we could have her Cat in the Hat ones. So this is a great thing to do for gifting and to sort of give a little something extra to go with that quilt and make it all coordinate together. So I'm going to show you how to do a French seam, which sounds a lot more complicated than it is, but it's a way to be able to enclose all of your raw edges without needing to use a serger. So we also go over how to do the hot dog style for the envelope. So that way all your raw edges are concealed in the sleeve of the pillowcase, and it's a very inexpensive add-on because you need about 3/4 of a yard of body fabric and then 1/4 yard of whatever your sleeve is going to be, and then you can have a bonus flange. That's just a 2.5-inch strip folded in half, and honestly you can skip that. I probably am going to skip it in any of the future ones that I do, just because you have to like press it every time it comes out, otherwise it looks funny. It's a cute little accent, but it's not 100% necessary if you want to skip that step. So if you want to make a pair of coordinating pillows, you could always get 1.5 yards of fabric from us, and then for the body, and then 1/2 yard for the outside, and that is going to be plenty to make a pair of pillows. And so you can check out some of our novelty ones, kid-friendly ones, any of our holiday. Those are always fun to pull together, or just use it with extra fabric that you have from your quilts that you are going to be gifting. Let's get started with the tutorial.
To get started, you need 3/4 yard of one print, and this works really well with large scale prints if you're looking for a place to use those. And you need a 2.5-inch piece of fabric that contrasts with that large print, and you're going to fold that in half and press it hot dog style, so lengthwise. And then we have a 9-inch wide piece of fabric, and that's going to be your sleeve. And it's really great if you can make sure there's some contrast between the body of your pillowcase, which is a 3/4 of a yard piece, and the 9-inch wide piece, and then just use this little 2.5-inch piece to separate those two. It really brings out the contrast in those two pieces. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a giant fabric roll. So I'm going to start by taking my 9-inch piece of fabric and lay that out nice and flat. And then I'm going to take my 2.5-inch strip that I pressed lengthwise, and I'm going to put the raw edges even with the raw edge of that 9-inch wide piece of fabric. And you don't have to have it perfect at this point. We'll get it all lined up once we get everything together. And now you're going to want to put the right sides together of your 3/4 yard piece of fabric with right up against where that 2.5-inch piece is. And if your fabric is directional, you want so that there's a top and a bottom, you're going to want to put it so that the top of the fabric is even with these raw edges up here. Now here's the part that seems a little strange. We're going to take the bottom edge of this fabric, and you're going to fold it up, but not all the way to the top. You want to leave about 1 inch or so that you have room to sew this seam allowance. And I just kind of keep folding that in half until I have a nice tight roll, so that way I can pull the bottom edge of this 9-inch wide piece up with the top, and then I can pin all 5 layers together. So I'm pinning part of my 9-inch, and then up next I have my 3/4 of yard piece fabric, and then I have my 2.5-inch that's folded in half, and then I have the other side of that 9-inch. And as you go down, you just want to make sure that all those edges are lined up and even, and put a pin in there. And you just want to keep going down, pinning about every 6 inches or so until you reach the end of your roll. Once you have your fabric tube all pinned together, you just want to sew down those raw edges with a 1/4 inch seam. Now once you get to the end, you are going to want to back up those seams because that will really help for the next step. So now we're going to take that edge that we backed up with the stitches and we're just going to pull out the inside. And if you've done it all right, when you pull the centers out, you should have your top sleeve of your pillowcase, which doesn't have any raw edges on the back side or the front, and you'll have this little flange that also doesn't have any raw edges showing, and then you'll have the body of your pillowcase. Now we have to press this pillowcase in the seams we just sewed before we can trim up the sides. I find a little bit of spray starch helps at this step to get it good and crisp. So all you're going to do is go ahead and grab your iron and grab the top of your pillowcase and just slide that iron on up. And that will help pull both the back and the front up at the same time. Now we have to cut off the selvages and even up the edges so that way we can pin everything together to do our French seam. So I start by lining up my ruler with our sleeve end, and I have my inch line in line with that fold. Once I have that all lined up, I'm ready to cut. Now I have to square up our bottom edge too, but first I'm going to pin my seams so that way we can get a good square edge on the bottom and we can begin our French seam. So here's where a French seam differs. Instead of sewing with your right sides together like we do for every other aspect of quilting, we're going to actually sew with the wrong sides together first. And that is what creates the part that's going to be enclosed in the French seam. So the first part that I'm going to pin together is where that sleeve comes together, because that's going to be the point that if it's off, you're going to be able to tell. So I'm going to put a little pin in at that point. And from the rest of it, you can just pin about every 6 inches or so, whatever you're comfortable with, all the way down the edge of this, just the one side of your pillowcase. Now that I have my side pinned, I'm ready to square up the edges. And what I've done here is I've lined up an inch line of the ruler with the fold of the pillowcase, and then I'm just going to cut right up that bottom seam to square it up. Now we're going to use a 1/4 inch seam to sew down those raw edges, and you're going to want to start with backing up your seam. I know we don't normally do this in quilting, but you're going to want to for this project. So I'm getting those stitches reinforced and then just sewing right on down. Now as I come to this corner, I'm just going to sew right off the edge, turn the work, and then sew down that bottom half of that pillowcase. I'm going to reinforce my stitches when I get to the bottom, again just to make sure that corner is really good and secure. We just have a couple more steps and then our pillowcase is complete. First we have to trim the seam down to 1/8 of an inch. So what I've done here is I'm just laying the ruler about halfway in between the raw edge and the seam line that we just stitched, and then I'm just going to cut on down that. Alright, I am back at the iron and we are going to turn this pillowcase inside out to get it ready for the rest of that French seam. And by trimming that helps it make it easier to make sure that we don't have any raw edges poking out when we do this next step to finish that seam. So what I'm doing here is I'm turning it completely inside out, and I'm kind of making sure that I poke those corners out with my index finger. And then I'm going to have my handy spray starch with me again, and I'm just going to spritz this long side here. Then I'm going to pinch the fold back here and use my fingernails to make sure that that seam is pressed out as far as possible. And then I take my iron and go over that to get that seam good and pressed. Then you're just going to keep doing that all the way down the seams on the side and the bottom of your pillowcase. I've got my seam edges pressed nice and flat, so I'm not going to pin anything because it should stay in place really easily. And I'm going to start with the top of my pillowcase, and I'm going to reinforce those stitches again because this is the final seam. We want to make sure that they stay put. And I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam all the way around the side and the bottom of my pillowcase. That's it. You can turn your pillowcase right side out. And if you want to press it again to get a nice crisp edge, you can, but otherwise your pillowcase is done. And we have a nice French seam, so we have no raw edges on the inside of here, so it won't fray when you wash it. You have your own custom pillowcase that's made with your favorite sports team, character, or in my case, I'm ready to go to Quilt Retreat. Thanks for following along. I'm Stephanie Soebbing from QuiltAddictsAnonymous.com. Make sure you check out the website for lots of more fun sewing tutorials.